Good morning. A week ago today it started raining. And it hasn't rained. It's rained every day since, I reckon. But anyway, we're drying out a little bit. Glad you're here. Good to have our visitors with us today. Thankful for your presence with us. We'll begin with the word of prayer this morning. Wayne, how would you lead us in prayer? Amen. If you follow along in the book, the topic this morning is the Great Commission. And you would think that's a word or a phrase that everybody would know that phrase. And we hear it quite a bit. I know as we teach and sermons and just talking in general about the Great Commission. Where's it found? What book? Could be two books. What book is it found in? What? Matthew is one. Mark would be the other. Matthew and Mark. So to know where it's found, if I were to ask you what chapter in Matthew, 28, and Mark, 16. So that gets you in the neighborhood of where the two verses are. They're pretty similar. They're not identical, but they're pretty similar. But think about it, a lot of folks don't know what you have known. Here's just what you know this morning. In 2018, there was a survey taken of church-going people, and 51% never heard of the Great Commission. That's church-going people. 51% never heard of it. 28% had heard of it but didn't know what it meant. 17% heard of it and knew what it means. And 6% were not sure. So really, 17% really heard the phrase, the Great Commission. They knew the verses. Were there in Matthew 28 and Mark 16. They knew the verses. They knew what it meant. And probably for the most part, they could quote it. So that's in 2018, and probably I would think that those numbers have gone up. Maybe the 17 has come down, I don't know. But generally, things don't always do well when it comes to Bible knowledge as we grow in the years. So 3 years there since this survey was taken, and that's it. They put a list of verses in front of them and said, now which one of these verses is the Great Commission? That was Matthew 28, 18 through 20. 37% said that's it. That's the Great Commission. And of course, that verse says, go into all the world, make disciples of every nation, of all the nations, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things I commanded you, and lo, I'm with you always to the end of the age. That sounds very familiar. Okay, we'd have picked that one out. But 16% said it was Matthew 22 through 37. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. They said that's the Great Commission. But it's not. In John 14 and verse 6, 8% said, that's it, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Well, that's not the Great Commission, but some thought that would be it. In Mark 8, 3 through 4, that's where Christ fed the 4,000. Don't know why they would choose that one. Thought that's the Great Commission. Maybe they thought the Great Commission was a great feeding. I don't know, but they picked that one. In Mark 12 and verse 17, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, unto God the things that are God's. 2% thought it was that, and 33% none of those. So I don't know where the 33% were going. Now, another thing that they found out when they asked the individuals this, those that had been born prior to 1946, they called them the elder movement. You have elders and you have boomers, and Generation X, millennials, and the Generation Z. But the elders prior to 1946, almost all of them knew it was Matthew 28. Almost all of them. You come to the baby boomers, a lot of them knew it. But when you got into the Generation X and Millennials and Generation Z, they had no idea. So what is that telling us? Somebody is not passing it on. What the verse is, what the verse means, what it means to us, that verse is not being given to others in order to know what it means. So the older you are, the more apt you're going to know that verse and know the importance of it and what it means when it comes to what the Great Commission is all about. But here we have the two verses where we find the Great Commission. Matthew 28, 19 through 20, and Mark 16, 15, 16. Again, we just already quoted 28, but Mark 16, 15 there, and he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized will be saved. He who does not believe will be condemned. So again, there's your two verses that reference to the Great Commission. Some call it the Great Omission because we're not following it the way that Christ has given it to us. They say it's a command, not a suggestion. It's a command that we are to go into all the world. And we say go into all the world, it means as we go. It doesn't mean that we have got to cross the sea and go to another foreign land. It means as we go in our life, we go. As we go to work tomorrow, as we go on vacation, as we go wherever. We are to take the gospel with us, that great command we're to carry with us. It wasn't just given to these apostles, it was given to all the disciples. And we are to teach this, we're to live the life as we should live as a way of illustration, what Christ, the love of Christ is all about. And at the same time, we are to go and to teach as well when the opportunity comes about. If you're not going to live it, you're not going to be able to teach it. They're not going to listen to you, especially if they know you. So don't go try and convince somebody that, here's what being a Christian is all about if you're not living a Christian life. Don't do that. You're going to do harm is what you'll do. So it doesn't mean that we just go around the world. It means that we go, it may be starting our own home. It's where it may start. Right there in our own home, that we carry out the Great Commission in our very own home. Again, this was nothing that was new to the disciples. They knew that they were to go. In Luke 24, 46 and 47, it's here that Christ told his disciples to start in Jerusalem. Then he said to them, thus it is written, and thus it was necessary for Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day, and that repentance and remission of sins should be preached in his name to all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. So there was the connection to the Great Commission. Okay, it was necessary. He was going to die. He's going to be raised from the dead. And that message of the gospel, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. The message of the gospel was to begin at Jerusalem, and it certainly did. In Acts 1 and Acts 2, just as Christ said, preach to all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. And there, even at that time, there were many nations that were represented as they were come there for Pentecost, as they were there for that day. Many nations were represented. And when they left and went back home, those who became Christians, they carried it with them. In Luke 10 and verse 2, Christ talks about the importance of the laborers, those who are going to do the work. It says, and he said to them, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Pray for those who are going to be the laborers. He doesn't say pray for the lost. Pray for those who are going out. There's so few of them. And pray that there be even more. That's what he is talking about here in the prayer. Pray for these individuals who are going out. And that's just not meaning those who are missionaries in themselves, those who are taking on that mission role to go to different places. And I'm certainly glad that they want to do that. And it's good that we have the means to support missionaries when they go to different places. And I'm sure we, as we do here, support different missionaries going here and there. But it doesn't take the place of us going. We may think, well, I can just throw some money at this work here, this good program, and I've fulfilled the Great Commission. No, you haven't. We are as individuals. We got to do what we can. And that's why he says, pray here for the laborers. That's us. That we will make the most of every opportunity that we have. And that we will speak and do the right thing. So it's not praying for the lost. It's not praying for the sick, which those are fine prayers. But here in this particular case, when it comes to the Great Commission, pray for the laborers as they are going out. Now, as we go back to the Great Commission in Matthew 28, we see here the three things that Christ tells us to observe, need to look at. In Matthew 28:19, again, he says to go. That means as we go, we are to go. We are to make disciples. Again, a disciple is a follower, one that's going to follow. And then once they are become disciples, they got to be taught, teaching them to observe. Too often, we look at number one, go and make disciples, but we fail to understand verse 20, that that's a continuation. Trying to teach them to observe the things that God would want us to know. And that's not always easy. You try. And sometimes individuals, after they become Christians, they realize, well, this isn't for me, and that's terrible. And you're trying to teach them. You're trying to teach them to ground them in what the Lord have them to do and how to live. But sometimes they don't want to be taught, and they're gone. It happens. But it's a good thing to do our very best. It's more than just baptizing the individual. It is then to teach them afterwards about the ways of God and what to teach them about commitment beforehand, but also teach about the commitment as well after they become a child of God. Now, one thing that happened here when it comes to, say, the teaching to observe, after Christ was resurrected and he spends that 40 days with his disciples and others before he ascended back into heaven, there were some of these disciples, or we call them apostles, that had doubts. Well, during that 40-day period, Christ has got to take care of these doubts that they would have. Who is the one that's most famous for his doubts? That'd be Thomas. Who is the other? Well, we don't know who the others were, but there were others. Of the 12 or 11 after his crucifixion, some of them had doubts. Well, they had to be taken out. So Christ here is teaching them in that 40-day period to ground them. Whenever, after the resurrection, Matthew 28 and verse 10, when they go back to the disciples, the ladies do, then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." There's instructions to go. Then in verse 16, then the 11 disciples went into Galilee to the mountain which Jesus had appointed them. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. Thomas will be among that, but there's others. They had their doubts. The thing here, they worshiped, and yet they had doubts. Is it possible that among Christians, that we come to worship, but we have doubts about Christ. You would think, no way. Man, there could be a way. There could be. And that's why we assemble, here on Sunday, have a Bible study, and we'll worship here in a little bit, and then we'll worship in the evening, and then on Wednesday we come together for study. We're trying to make sure that we are grounding ourselves so that we don't have any doubts, that we're certain, we're for sure that Christ is who He said He is, that He died, He resurrected, He's now with God, He's coming back. We don't need to have any doubt whatsoever that that's going to take place. No doubts. And if we do have doubts, the only way to get rid of those doubts is getting into the Word. Got to get into the Word and study it and let the Word get rid of these doubts. And we have questions. Questions are good. Got to ask those questions. There's an answer out there somewhere to them. And there's a lot of information out there, more so than it's ever been, places we can go and help our doubts. Help our doubts, if that were to be the case. But here, these apostles here, they had some doubts. But after that 40 days, those doubts were gone. No more doubts. Because they were grounded. If they had any doubts after 40 days, they wouldn't have gone through what they went through in order to be a follower, as far as giving of their life. If there had been any doubts there, they would have backed out and that would have been it. But Christ grounded these individuals. And how did He do it? Well, there's three things to look at here. One is, tell me and I will forget. Number two, show me and I will remember. Walk with me and I will understand. He told those disciples for 3 years, I'm going to die. I'm going to be resurrected. He told them all about that. But they forgot. When it came right down to that, when He was crucified on that Friday and they scattered and they had all those doubts, they had forgotten what Christ had told them. Well, then He showed them. He showed them after His resurrection. He was with them there. He showed them, and they began to remember. Oh, yeah, I remember it now. And then He began to walk with them for 40 days, and they understood. Now, we can forget, and we can remember, and we can understand. And we need to hope we don't forget, but it's just a human thing about it, that sometimes it happens. Sort of like you can read somebody something, or you can show it to them, or then again you can do more to help them to understand. That's what it's about. Tell me and I'll forget. Show me, I will remember. Walk with me and I'll understand. We need to understand. It's a process that we go through here. Even though we have all this technology today, we can be studying with somebody on the other side of the world, and that individual may, through study, may become a Christian. Again, somebody's got to get with them. You got to contact somebody on the other side of the world to get with them, to help them to understand. Help them to remember and understand. It's just a part of it. Nothing takes the place of being face to face. That is certainly and Christ understood that. And with all our technology that we have, that's one thing that we are missing. We are missing, especially the younger group. Again, that face-to-face is being missed. I think a lot of good comes from that. So we talked about the Great Commission. There's another commission that sometimes is mentioned in the Scriptures, known as the Limited Commission. Limited. And in Matthew 10, 5, and 6, we find the Limited Commission. And why was it limited? Why is it called the Limited Commission? It was limited. limited to the Jews only. It wasn't limited to the Gentiles. Here in the beginning, it was to go to the lost sheep of Israel. We see that in verse 6. Well, verse 5, these 12 Jesus sent out and commanded them, saying, do not go into the way of the Gentiles, do not enter a city of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So later now they would go to everyone. But here in the beginning, as the promise was made to Abraham, the commission here was to be taken to the Jewish individuals first. They were to be taught first. And that was the promise that was given there to Abraham. So here we find in Matthew 10, they went out 2 by 2s. They spread out. They went out everywhere. And they went to the house of Israel. But of course, we know as time goes, learn that many of them rejected this. And then they turned to the Gentiles. But still, it was given here to the house of Israel, to the Jewish individuals first. Now, this is not the only time that the limited commission went out. In Luke 10, in verse 1, and after these things, the Lord appointed 70 others and sent them 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place where he himself was about to go. So in addition with the 12, here you have 70, and they're going out everywhere and preparing the people. They're telling the people in these different cities and locations, there's one coming who is Jesus. And these men here, they could do miraculous abilities, miraculous gifts. Well, they would go out and, well, how did you do that? Well, there's one coming that's even greater. And preparing these people for when Christ did get to these different cities and preach, there would be a massive amount of people that were there who would follow, who would be ready for his arrival. So when the 12 went out, they were doing what they were told. When the 70 went out, they too were doing what they were told and doing great things of that time. And of course, we have examples of the Great Commission being carried out. In Acts chapter 2, on the day of Pentecost, I don't know how many thousands that were there. Some estimate it to be in the millions, but don't know how many were there. But 3,000 we know that day became Christians there in Acts 2. So there they were executing it. In Acts 8, when the great persecution came about, when the Christians were scattered, they just didn't scatter and go to different places. They scattered and carried the gospel with them, the scriptures say. They carried the truth with them. So there they were executing the Great Commission. We find examples of Philip in Samaria. He went there and was taught, having great success. Then he went on to called away from Samaria and taught the Ethiopian there in Acts 8. In Acts 10 and 11, Cornelius and his household, there he was taught by Peter. Cornelius was taught by Peter first, and Cornelius said, let's get the household in on this. And the people there of his household became Christians. In Acts 16, Paul taught Lydia and her household. Again, every opportunity that he had. Acts 13 through 15 was Paul's first missionary journey. And then 16 and 18, we find his second missionary journey. He was going out and doing what he could. And again, establishing churches in these different places and locations because of the Great Commission. He, as he went, he carried the truth, the gospel with him. And that's what we are to do. We are to carry the truth, always be ready, do our best to speak of somebody. And it may not be that it may be that people will come to us and give us the opportunity. Not that we got to go and start asking questions. They may come to us with questions or whatever and give us the opportunity. I remember it was several years ago. I can't remember how many, 25, 30. It's that little 82 from Tuscaloosa down, a little road stop there. I mean, a little bathroom place, stopping, such as that, going down, it's on the left. Well, we had stopped there one day, and coming back out, going to the vehicle, and this older gentleman was coming into Tuscaloosa. And he said, where's some good places to eat and this and that, and what exit does he get off at? And I was giving this information. And then at the end of that conversation, he said, are you a Christian? In that conversation. Just ask. Now, he wanted to know where to eat, but at the same time, he's making the most of that opportunity, just asking the question. Now, if I'd said no, I don't know what his next words would have been. I don't know if he had some literature to give me or whatever it may have been. But here was somebody who was not ashamed to talk about it. He's just an older gentleman right there. So there's opportunities. And we have opportunities, and we can't be shy about it. We need to be bold about it and do what we can to make sure it's put out there. So we can do it. All right, the Great Commission. We all know it. If we were to give a survey, we'd all answer 100%. We know what it is. And I know we would. We know what it is. Next week, we talk about, I think, the heart of an individual. I think that's next on the topic. So that's where we'll go next week. Anything on our class this morning? All right, we'll conclude here a couple minutes early, but we'll go ahead and conclude this time.